up in the paper, the themselves had purchased $90,000 worth of stock. Whoa, this was enough to buy land and build a building. It wasn't but a matter of a little bit, and it was in the paper that they in fact did buy land. And the land that they bought, 18 acres, is what we currently call 4-H fairgrounds. And of course the building that is now the county maintenance, road maintenance building, is the building that they built. And that was the building that was going to be the factory for the Motox Tractor. It was, of course, but a day or two, and they broke ground. But the ground was so hard, the horses and the slip scoops couldn't tear into it. So they brought their Motox Tractor in with a plow, just tore the wall up, which made it beautiful for the horses then to do their thing, to get that. 4 months later, that building was done. Think about that. How long would it take to make that building today? They didn't have any cranes or anything like that. But anyway, it was done. And the stockholders came in, decided they was going to have a dance. The building was empty. 3,000 stockholders showed up for that dance and danced the night away before the building got putting stuff in it. All right. The idea was that to get started, they would buy the rear end casting and all of the goodies and parts and put it on the railroad, ship to Wabash, or either on service trucks. And in that building, they would simply assemble all these parts they purchased, plus they would get the bigger Waukesha engine, and they had their tractor. So within a month or 6 weeks, they should be able to have tractors going out the back door. Yet, they had orders, firm orders. The Plano factory in Illinois had an order in for 500. They decided that, hey, they'd like to have a 3-bottom tractor alongside their 2-bottom tractor. So the customers had a choice. And they had another order for 1,000 for many, several men, someplace up in east. And they were going to set up dealerships, and they were to ship overseas. So they had orders. They didn't have to worry about making a tractor and going out and selling it and making another one. They could make them as fast as they could make them. And as soon as they got capability of making the parts here themselves, eventually they get to the point where it was all done here. And that building is a modular type affair. They could just keep adding on as they needed more space. We need to back up just a little bit. When Gray went back to Illinois right after it was shut down the first time, he built up the tractor, a tractor, and put a 1 size larger Waukesha engine in it to make it a 3-bottom, put it on a train, shipped it back here. And by that time, tractor demos were popular. They would have these demonstrations where all of the tractor companies would bring their tractors in, and they'd all plow up a storm and see who could outdo each other. The first one here was out north of town, a couple of miles on the Laketon Road, oh man, I'm sorry. Calvin. And maybe some of you know where that farm is. That was the first one demo here, a 2-day affair. Service truck, by this time, had gotten into the airplane business. And they had 2 or 3 passenger, twin-engine passenger planes. They built the airport out where fast food alley is now. It was parallel with 24. And they had their planes up in the air. and selling rides to people to go up there and look down and see these tractor demos going on below. And it was like 15, 16, 1,800 people would show up at them places. And of course, the plane dealer would report on it the next day in the paper. The Motox Tractor always made good appearing, made good impression. And so the service truck started hauling the Motox Tractor all Peru, Logansport, Fort Wayne, Kokomo, Rochester, so they could make a impression or a reputation all over the area, not just Wabash. And of course, this helped boost everything too. But it just, things like that. A farmer could go into a dealer and look at a new tractor and kick the wheels and sit in the seat and jiggle his steering, daydream about what it'd be like to have this tractor out on his farm. At a demo though, and as soon as they started talking money, his pocketbook that had gotten sort of loose was tightened up and he hung on to it and put it back in his pocket. But he could go out to one of these demos. He had the very same tractor. He could walk alongside it while it was roaring. He could watch the guy sitting up there in the seat just having a ball. And he'd look back at the three-bottom plow, almost 4 feet in the shop. Wow, man, oh man, would that be great on his part. And his pocketbook got a lot looser. So they had a purpose, and they served the purpose well. Got lost. When it was time to start making tractors, somebody talked E.E. Gray into changing engines and to switch from the Waukesha to a Buda, which was a good engine too. This threw a huge monkey wrench into the whole program, just shut it down, because new castings had to be made to mate up to the Buda engine. Manchester Foundry had the contract to make the castings for the original one. Deals was going to machine them until Wabash was able to do it. And that program stopped immediately. The new castings, after they were designed, were given to Foundry. They probably give them a better price, maybe a quicker delivery or whatever. No one made their promised dates on anything not along the line. And month after month after month went by. Nothing happening in the building other than mounting equipment in it. And the shareholders started to get antsy and mad. Hey, what's happening? When are we going to get moving? Let's go, let's get with it. Everything was always promised this, and that, and nothing's happening. But eventually, September 25th, 1919, the first prototype Motox rolled out the door with a Buda engine. The tractor demo was organized quickly, and it was going to be south of town on a farm called the Purdy Farm, and I don't have the slightest idea where that's at, but it was south of town. And there was a humongous crowd there. And by this time, the other, even the larger tractor companies, Titan and Samson and Fordson, were in business, so there were lots of tractors there. And there was a huge crowd, most of them were shop stockholders in the Motox. And of course, I think they probably drove the tractor out to the farm, and they probably dropped the plow in and put it down nice and deep, make a big impression. But something horrible happened. And this is the mystery to this day. Nobody knows. The next day, in the plane dealer, nothing. Not a word. It was if it never happened. And this was a real travesty, because for history, for like this place, newspaper have to record everything, good or bad. And in that case, some reason or other, they opted to not say anything about it because evidently it was bad. My own opinion, and take this with a grain of salt, my own opinion is the new Buda engine was brand new. They put it in it, they drove it out there maybe, and they went to work. And in those days, you had to a motor. You didn't just go to work and do it. You had to break it in right. And that engine may have blown up. They may have thrown a rod, whatever. The other option, which is probably more plausible, is the Buda engine was just too powerful and literally tore up the rear end, which really was designed to be a two-bottom tractor. And I would guess that this was most likely the thing that happened. This, of course, caused the directors to have probably a pretty quick meeting. They had to decide what to do. Do we battle with everybody and spend a lot of time, months and months and months, redesigning that whole rear end and fix it up, or do we just shut it down, take our losses, and walk away? Obviously, this is what they decided to do. But there's other things that caused this, besides maybe the failure of the tractor. Henry Ford, in that meantime, had come out with his tractor that was built on the assembly line, just like the Model T. And by that time, Model Ts were running up and down the street of Wabash. And now then, the Motox Tractor was there. I'm sorry, the Fordson Tractor was there. And they come out, and they sold for $760. That was cheap. Motox was a $2,000 tractor, and most of the other tractors were $1,800, $2,000. But International Titan brought their price down to $1,000. Samson, another big company, brought their price down to $760, and that's the Fordson. He dropped his to $660, and eventually dropped it again to $625. If any of you were down to the old boys' old toys, there was a Titan tractor down there. And it was a 1020. It was 1917, 1020, which was a common size. The 10, meaning 10 horsepower on the drawbar, 20 horsepower on the pulley. And if you saw in these ads, this was rated 1830. 18 horsepower on the drawbar, 30 horsepower on the belt. A pretty good sized tractor. They also say in that ad that the engine had 4 1/4 inch pistons. And there was a 6-inch throw on the crankshaft. Big piston, long crankshaft, a lot of torque, a lot of power. Didn't turn over very fast, but oh my goodness, it must have had terrific torque. And that's why I think maybe it just literally tore up the rest of the tractor. And don't forget, that's strictly my idea. No one knows for sure. And wouldn't it be amazing if today we could have, if that tractor would have been kept someplace, and we could have it up there sitting beside the truck. It just, it would be great, and everybody would know what happened, and everybody could see what a tractor it was. Henry Ford was out without problems. Yeah, he had a $625 tractor, one that everybody could afford, and it was reported that the local Ford dealer sold 75 that summer. That's a lot of tractors in this area. Of course, there were a lot of farmers here that wanted tractors. They didn't have them, they wanted them desperately. Can you imagine? The farmers were so sick and tired of harsing up and working those stinking sweaty horses. And 200 yards down the field, you had to stop and rest, go some more and stop and rest. You had to have water and you had to have feed and everything else. It was a real tough job out in the field. It just, the Fordson had 2 or 3 faults. For one, it was difficult starting. It was, had a history of being a hard starter. We had a neighbor that lived across the woods from us, about a half a mile, that had a Fordson. And he had 4 boys, grown boys, and they would take turns cranking it. And if it didn't start within a few minutes, they'd harness up several horses and drag it until it started. And then they would run it till dark. But we knew exactly when they went out to the field and really started working, we could hear the growl half a mile away. That rear end, whether it was the way the teeth were cut, the material they were of, or the casting itself that made this roar, I don't know. But that rear end also got hot. In the fall or the winter time, no big deal. But in the hot summer, it got hot. Hot enough that you couldn't touch it, it burned you. So operating one of these Fordsons was not comfortable. It was a very uncomfortable tractor to drive. You're sitting there, it's just like sitting there running a tractor over a fireplace under your feet. These other tractors got away with having $200–300 more. Samson and the Titan, and there was Minneapolis, Moline, Alice Chalmers, Waterloo Boy, which ended up being John Deere, and several like that. And they found out that there was a percentage of farmers that were willing to pay the little extra money and drive a tractor they could really enjoy. Wow, it was nice. And when they wanted to start, it started, and it was kept running all the time. So Ford, it wasn't all gravy, but the ones that had them got them for $625. And you can imagine in their head they were saying, okay, this didn't cost me very much. I got rid of my horses. I can farm and it'll do the farming. I can afford some discomfort. And having this, being able to have this tractor and not spending this much money. I had forgotten one era. Early 1900, they started making hit-and-miss engines, which probably everybody's sort of familiar with. If you go to these tractor shows, there was a lot of them. And they were a godsend to the farmer in his chores. These hit-and-miss engines would run anywhere from 1.5 to 10 horses. They mounted on a little cart, drug it around to wherever you wanted it. Put it on the pump the water for the livestock, take it down to the barn, put it on a grinder, grind feed for the livestock. Some of them had seed cleaning and grading machines that were hand cranked. They'd run them and do that. Had an elevator in your crib. You brought your wagon and your horse up to the unloading area, unhooked the horses, brought them around to a turnstile, hooked them up to that, and they walked in circles. A shaft out the bottom, came over the elevator, ran in. When you got done, you took the horses off the turnstile, hooked them back, put on the wagon, just ready to go back out in the field and go to work. But the horses were tired. If you had one of those engines, you pulled it out through there, made a special little short shaft, started the engine, got the elevator running, unloaded your load, got done, turned the engine off, got on the wagon and went out to the field. Your horses were nice and rested. So they really were godsends for the barnyard for the chores. But they didn't help the field at all. So when these other tractors come along, it was terrific. After, like I said, a couple of days after the failure, there was an ad in the paper. The land and the building were up for sale by the plumber real estate company. And of course, it wasn't but a matter of time when the lawsuits started coming in like that. But can you imagine the city and the county, when that tractor first came out the back door, they were all on cloud nine. They were all happy as larks. Everything is coming together, and their tractor was out, they were in business. Wow, this was the beginning. And then when it failed, the next day, they couldn't have been any lower. One day, they went from cloud nine to really unhappy, mad, wondering what happened. And it seems difficult. And I imagine it was really difficult for them people because maybe you only had $20, $30 worth, but you lost it all. And I'm sure that hurt as much as anything. Now, you know the rest of the story. Amen. Is there any questions?
That Fordson was real light on the front end, too.
Yeah, really wasn't that much of a
I heard
problem. Yeah.
talking about rare.
Yeah.
I grew up in that neighborhood from 1942 to 1963, 64.
Yeah.
I played on that ramp on the south side of the building. What was that for? What was the ramp for?
You got me. I don't really know. In the newspapers, they really didn't say much at all about the building. About the only thing they ever said about it was they were, when it was done, they were able to start moving in heavy equipment, big lathes, big drills, big grinders, everything that there was to do the manufacturing. And that's all they really ever said. I would guess that that ramp was something that was added because
Oh, it may not have been original part of the. It may not have been original part of the building.
it might not.
Oh, that's a.
But again, it might have. That would have been an easy way to load tractors onto a service truck to deliver or whatever. And
Was it tall enough from the first floor to the second floor?
There was not a second floor.
so,
Oh, okay.
I played in
think
that
the
building
is
and
just
everything.
exactly like it was when they built it.
The name's above the doors.
And yes, oh, yeah, that's another thing. It is amazing. Okay, sure, I'll grant you that the Motox tractor only affected Wabash for 1918, 1919. But nobody, or regularly nobody, knows about it, even heard about it, could care less about it. People that work at Fort drive back and forth past that building twice a day and have been doing it for years. Never noticed that sign, and letters must be 2 foot tall, cast in cement over the It couldn't be any plainer. But no one paid any attention. And of course, the Motox tractor was not a good memory for anybody. Yeah.
How long did the factory last in Illinois, the Motox?
They never said. All it says in the advertisement is that after 1921, that was the last model. So I'm guessing that the competition and all this price cutting killed them. And it killed 100 more factories. All these little factories just died a miserable death when the big companies started cutting the price down. They couldn't sell anything.
Are any of their tractors still in existence, Mr. O'Gara?
Not that they tell.
McCrae was elected governor.
Yeah.
In 1924, he went to prison for mail fraud. Do you believe that he was honest in his operations here?
I seemingly he was. What kind of strings he pulled to get the process started again.
Well, he had money in it.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And it was after the war.
Yeah.
When they restarted, I'm sorry, it wasn't.
No,
September 25th, they restarted, and the war wasn't over till October 11th, November 11th.
but the man had money in it,
Well,
so he wanted
yes.
to start.
Yeah, he was very popular, extremely popular, but he was not a good man. He was sort of like some of them they have in Chicago nowadays. And, it was, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. He was helpful in the beginning. He probably was very helpful, but in the end, he sure was. And maybe down the drain, he worked like mad to get his money. Whether anybody else got theirs or not.
Charlie Haas, that you mentioned, was very influential in this town. At one time, he owned and edited the Plain Dealer. By the time the Motox Tractor came along, banking, but I think he still owned stock in the Plain Dealer. Therefore, I know who kept that story out of the newspaper the next day. I cannot prove that.
No. That's the trouble now.
I understand the reason.
Papers are made to report everything, good or
But
bad.
Charlie reported everything else. But
Oh, yeah. I got a stack of papers upstairs that I found in all them newspapers that I went through for a year or better. And, oh, man, the stuff that was happening in Wabash. I was researching a tractor, but at the same time, you see all of this other stuff. You can't see it. And it was fascinating, absolutely fascinating, what this town was going through during that period of time.
So as far as is known, there's only one tractor built.
One tractor built in Wabash, yes, that's absolute fact. There was only one tractor built with a Buda engine. Plano, Illinois used the Waukesha engine. And the demonstrator that he had over here for the 3-plow had the bigger Waukesha engine. It performed perfectly. It had plenty of power, it was dependable, and they did it. A huge mistake was made, and whoever talked him into changing over. And he was an engineer and a developer, and I can't believe that he wouldn't have realized that this new engine was so much more powerful than the old one. And taking that in, maybe he thought his rear end was, his tractor was impossible to tear up. But the horsepower of that Buda engine had to be true.
The Buda engine, what's the story on it go? Still, who owns it?
Still going. It may have ceased in the past few years, but Buda engines and Waukesha engines were used in farm tractors for years and years and years. I had a case. It had a Waukesha engine. I had my co-op. I believe it had a Buda engine. No?
Co-op tractors have Buda engines, number 4 cylinders and some 6 cylinders.
Yeah. And I had one. And it was a good engine. They all were. These Waukeshas and Nimbo. And there were other engines beside that were being built. But those two were the prominent ones and were used in so many. Continental was another one that made engines. And they really were popular. I had a Silver King with a Continental engine, and I had a, what else did I have with a Continental engine? I forget. But it was surprising how many big tractor companies would rather buy a Continental engine, a Waukesha, or a Buda engine rather than build them themselves.
Of the board of directors, is there any historical diaries or records of any of them that talk about this?
That is possible. Never thought about that. Had I done this 30 years ago, there would have been old guys like me in Wabash that very possibly were there at that demonstration. And Yarnell, he was, that Yarnell was the current operator of the yard, grandfather. And if I only talked to him, when he died here the last couple, 3 years, if I'd only talked to him, he surely would have remembered. He was the director. And I seriously doubt that the current Yarnell ever talked to his dad, or maybe his dad probably knew something about the Motox. But it just seems like every try to get through to find out something happens that you can't. I never, and it just aggravates me no end.
That was Will Yarnell, and he owned the Eagles Theater. Will
There was quite an outfit. I mean, they were the life of the town. Dale?
You think Ford had something to do with this?
Well, they did, and that they brought out their tractor and sold it so dirt cheap. They put a lot of companies out of business. Ford probably put 100 to 125 out of business pretty much overnight because selling that price so cheap. He wanted to make it so that everybody, every farmer could own a tractor, $625.
In a situation that would happen today, there would be a lot of questions about somebody in the back had pulled the strings to shut this thing down. I just can't understand why it could be so quiet. Just disappeared.
Really wasn't as quiet as what I might have indicated.
I mean,
the lawsuits just kept flowing in right afterwards. And as a matter of fact, the actual official closing of everything in the company, of all the books and everything, didn't happen until 1955. Evidently, litigation and everything else has been going on for a lot of years. But finally, Indianapolis closed it out for good, 1955.
Are there any stock certificates around? Have you ever seen one?
Hey, that's a good question. That's possible that somebody might have kept stock certificates. They're worthless, but they might have kept them.
I saw on the internet here a few years ago a stock certificate for the Progressive Truck Company. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah. How we doing? Amen again?
Yep.
Hey, thank you for everybody for coming. That everybody showed up, even the Toastmasters.
is there something here?
Thank you for coming, and come back in September to hear Stuart talk again on the Miami Indians.
Excuse me, ma'am. Is there something here in the museum about the Buda?
Yes, you betcha. Upstairs, there is a file of papers about this high.
Yeah. But there's no picture of it, like that picture there?
there isn't anything currently. And at the sooner, later someday maybe. But I gave all of my papers and I researched that.
One day wonder.
You,
Oh, I'm sorry, Pete.
you loaned those to me and then I took them up to
And
you.
you give them
They're,
upstairs, which is where they belong.
yeah, they are in the archive.
It represented three winters at work every morning. But that probably was the most enjoyable 3 months I ever spent in the wintertime.
I just can't understand how they can be shut down.
Those microfilms of all you Wabash County dealers are just unbelievably great. Everybody have a good time. Keep cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wes.
Okay, good luck tomorrow, you guys.
Anybody want this picture?
You don't have to like Can you apologize when you get that? License and this.
It's just like, it'd be just like going into a another time it's gonna turn into downtown. You just can't, it's like Google, I like
everybody's got weeds. 80 years old.
Really?
So it just.
Oh my
I
gosh.
usually go down there every year and cut the story now.
So we kept saying, well, they
More and more, and we're down to 2 reports.